Sometimes when you go a really long time without playing something that's one of your all-time favorites, you start to suffer from withdrawal. You get that urge to play again, which is exactly what happened to me with Xenoblade 2, as you guys might know is my favorite game ever. But, I didn't want to just play it the normal way that I have numerous times. I wanted to try something a little different. Now, in the past, I've sometimes just modified and done my own things, like beating the game with a common blade or something like that, or trying a Nuzlocke. But this time around, I remembered a recently released mod for the game that allowed you to randomize basically everything about the game. Driver order that you obtain them in the game, blades, and enemies being the most notable, but also stuff like chest drops, blade skills, driver skill trees, and anything else you could possibly think of. Even stuff like music should you really want to. So in this video, I wanted to show off that randomizer and my playthrough using the randomizer because it was very silly at times and a lot of fun, and was a unique experience at the same time. Now, in order to play this mod, you will need to hack your Switch, of course, but I will be providing a link to the randomizer in the description, as well as a link to the Discord server for the randomizer if you have any questions. There is another method as well. If you don't have a Switch, you can easily hack, but I will not be discussing that in this video, so join the Discord server for that. As always, if you enjoyed content on the Xenoblade series and other RPGs, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as it does help me out so much. I'm currently less than 5,000 subscribers away from hitting 100,000, and I'd love to hit that milestone soon. Let's get into it. So firstly, this mod was created by the users Sona Sofern and OFC 2000 Alex. Big shout out to them because there is a lot of stuff that went into this, and like I said, it's pretty much infinitely replayable with how it can always modify and change basically any aspect of the game to your choosing. Let's get into my playthrough now and talk about it more, as well as the intricacies of what I modified and what happened. So one of the really funny things about replacing characters is that sometimes it can completely break the cutscenes. Like right now, Nia is riding on nothing because Dromark just isn't there, which is really, really funny. Morag also just doesn't do anything. She just kind of stands there and T-poses, just as you saw Elma T-pose there as well. Elma is the Dromark replacement in this game, which is also really funny. And Aegeon is going to be the Pyro replacement. So Aegeon is essentially the Aegis in this playthrough for Morag, who we are taking to Elysium. So Morag basically promised Aegeon to go to Elysium in this playthrough here, and their voices are slightly different somehow. But regardless, there is not too much different about Aegeon here. He has most of the same skills. I only ended up randomizing 20% of the skills. I meant to actually randomize all of them, but I didn't do it correctly, and I was like, well, that's fine because it'll allow me to play with more familiar blades. But some of the skills are different, but most of them are going to be the same. So I start out with Aegeon. Aegeon is not bad as a starter blade here. He's a katana blade, so I get a free evasion art, which is really, really nice. And since Nia comes with Elma, that is also additionally very nice, since Elma also comes with an evasion art, and Elma is just in generally a very, very strong blade. She has a healing art on Nia as well, so even though she's not technically a healing blade, we do have a source of healing for early on in the game here. The first major fight starts in Chapter 2, because Chapter 1 is not very notable in this at all, since you're guaranteed to get past those fights because of soft locking concerns. But basically, all the enemies in this playthrough have been randomized. So our replacement for the Brog, the first real fight of this playthrough, is Healthy Yoyotsu. So Yoyotsu is an enemy from this year's Hero Pond challenge in challenge mode. Most of the Napon in this challenge are very, very squishy enemies, so this ends up being not a major concern. One thing about this game is that all of the boss enemies can be replaced with completely generic normal enemies, so some of the bosses might be a little anticlimactic, but sometimes those normal enemies can be replaced with really strong and powerful boss enemies as well, and challenge mode enemies are on the table also. So that makes a lot of these a little difficult sometimes, depending. So one interesting thing about how the AI works is if your Dromark replacement blade is a walking driver, you can just walk around and control them on your own, as you saw me just do with Elma there. So since Elma is Dromark in this playthrough, I end up being able to kind of walk around with her, and there's some weird properties with that, where sometimes enemy aggro just doesn't work properly sometimes. But this ends up being my first roadblock here, this fight against Padraig and the generic Ardanian soldiers. In this fight, instead of Padraig, we have this Quadwing, which is actually kind of a dangerous enemy here. He actually does some decent damage, and it can be a little bit annoying, but I'm able to get past him without too much difficulty the second time around after getting some levels out in the field and using my evasion art there to just make sure I avoid some of his dangerous attacks. Elma is normally a really strong blade, but she does have one of her skills replaced with a skill that gives her higher damage when she's above 100% HP. I believe it's her max affinity skill. So she's not quite as strong, but she's still a fairly strong blade and can be very, very useful and beneficial to have in the party here, thanks to her some of her unique mechanics. Now, I'm not going to really be able to take advantage of overdrive, since chain attacks are going to be the much better way to attack since I'm doing a normal mode playthrough, but it's not really the biggest deal in the world. So this next fight here is when you normally fight Brigid and Padraig again. So the Quad Wing is here once again, since he is the enemy that replaced Padraig when we randomized it. And I ended up getting kind of owned that time around. This is when I leveled up in the field, so I'm level 7 now, and I was level 5 before. So I ended up leveling up because the Kafiba surprisingly did a decent amount of damage. Not really the biggest deal in the world, though. After that, of course, Nia gets taken, so I end up doing some blade pulls, and I end up getting Praxis, who is not really going to be that useful since we already have a Gion. And then I also pull a Brona. So the thing about the Tora post-game blades is that they come with a really, really high auto attack by default. So I was going to say that I was going to try not to use these blades, but then I ended up getting almost soft lock into a fight where I was like, well, I probably need to use this. As you can see, there is a Giga Rosa, or a normal Rosa, over here. And this is actually the enemy I need to kill in order to advance the quest. Normally this is a level 9 Crabble enemy, which is very, very easy to take down with Rex and Pyra. But I'm just getting absolutely owned by it. And normally you don't have to fight a boss like this super early on. So I unfortunately just kind of say, okay, I'm just going to use a Brona so I can get past this. A Brona has a healing art on Morag, and she has a critical recharge art, and she has the really high auto attack. So this is what I have to do just to kind of get past this fight and take her out. So I'm very fortunate that I pulled a Brona. I guess you could say maybe I'm cheating using the really high auto attack, but I just kind of really needed a way to get past her this early on in the game, because the Gion was absolutely not going to do anything to her. That is one of the things you do have to worry about in a randomizer like this. Sometimes you can get those really, really powerful enemies like that. Now, I believe some of the randomizer settings have been changed to allow you to kind of make sure you're replacing boss enemies with boss enemies and normal enemies with normal enemies. So stuff like that may not happen when you're fighting stronger enemies when you shouldn't be, or when you're fighting weaker enemies when you are normally going to be fighting something really, really strong in this randomizer. But for when I was playing, this was not an option yet, but I think that is something that they did end up changing after my playthrough. So the thing about Tora's blades is that he can also have the versions of his Poppy forms swap. So I ended up with Poppy Cutie Pie immediately. And while you might think this is really, really broken, it's not actually as broken as you think it is. So because I got Poppy Cutie Pie first, she comes with Poppy Alpha's Poppy swap chart, and I don't have any of the technical manuals right now either. So I ended up with not nearly as many skill slots as you normally have on Cutie Pie, and since it's the Poppy Alpha chart, I can't equip a lot of the really good technical manuals anyway. Like, Poppy Alpha can't even equip Affinity Max Attack, and that's something that's like almost standard on Cutie Pie, you know? So there's a lot of stuff that normally would be able to increase my damage that I'm just not able to equip. But it's not all bad though, because of course Cutie Pie has a 3-hit break art, and that is still one of the most important aspects of her kit that she has. So even if she's not going to be the highest damage blade that we have, she's still really, really useful. I also end up pulling cross set on Nia. This is not even from the normal cross set core crystal this time around. It was literally just a random blade pull because the blades once again have been randomized. So I end up getting another really solid, strong blade there as well. The Dougal replacement is a very simple, nothing enemy, so we end up getting past him without any kind of issue at all. And then we get to fight the most powerful driver of the Empire, Rex, and his strongest blade, Percival. Except it's actually an Armu, because that is the enemy replacement for Morag. While Rex is the replacement for Morag in the drivers, and for the cutscenes as an enemy, Morag has been replaced with that Armu, and the Armu is basically a nothing enemy. Now, after that, we actually get into a pretty difficult and hard fight here against 3 kind of annoying enemies for the Vandom fight replacement, where he has 2 goons with him along with himself. This fight wasn't anything super notable or anything like that, but it was at least a little bit annoying. I also see a Mikhail in the overworld on the way to just stop the Arachno Queen, and I'm like, oh, Mikhail gets a lot of experience, I'll go ahead and fight him. Well, unfortunately, it was the version of Mikhail from Chapter 4 before the Enrage, or the second phase of the fight. So that version of Mikhail is programmed to not give any EXP, so I just ended up getting no experience at all, and I just ended up fighting him for no reason. That is also an unfortunate thing. I think that's something that they were able to change, just kind of change the EXP values for those Phase 1 versions of those fights, so you don't get screwed over like that, like I did there. But the actual story enemies after this are not anything too terribly bad. We have a Meduse replace the Arachno Queen, we had a Marin replace the Arterin, and then for the Akos replacement, we actually had this rampaging Soros, who is a little annoying, but not any more difficult than Akos himself. He's just kind of big and he does a lot of damage, but he doesn't have a really annoying checkmate, which kind of stops you from acting for a while. So that wasn't really the biggest deal in the world, and the Soros gives a lot of EXP, so I was able to chain attack him. And then we also have Captain Igna replace Zeke. That is basically a nothing enemy, and then an Anlude replaces the Violent Driver, also kind of a nothing enemy. So we end up getting some pretty anticlimactic fights for a lot of Chapter 3 here. And like I said, this is one of the bigger issues with the version that I played. I wasn't able to replace, like, boss enemies with, like, unique monsters or other boss enemies to, like, guarantee they're at least a little strong here. Now, Phase 1 of Makos does have Vandom, which was pretty cool, but unfortunately this phase is programmed to end as soon as you get one of them to half HP. So that was unfortunate. We don't really get to fight Vandam much longer there. And then we get the really funny cutscene of Aegeon just kind of transforming into Korra here, which was really, really funny to me, as you can see in the corner, me just laughing really hard here. So Korra is our Mithra replacement for this playthrough now. And Korra's not very good, so I'm not really going to be using this that much, but you know, she's there at least. She's kind of there. And it is really, really funny just seeing Aegeon transform into Korra. So I just wanted to show that cutscene because I thought it was really funny. The second half of Macos, we have much easier replacement enemies for the fight here. So it ends up going off without a hitch there. Just kind of a crab, generic enemy. And then we get to a multi-enemy fight. Now, these are some of the most dangerous fights in the entire game because depending on the enemy they get replaced with, you can be in a lot of trouble. These Linka Skeets end up being a little annoying. It took me a couple attempts, I think, because they're a little bit more annoying than the bird enemies you normally fight there. But when you have multiple enemies that are the same enemy, if the replacement enemy is something really difficult, and you're not supposed to fight something that tough, it can be a big, big problem that can kind of just destroy your playthrough for a very long time. I do end up getting a really good core chip out of a chest, and I end up putting that on Elma, so she's a lot more powerful now as well, which we're definitely going to need later. Lila was replaced with the Mammoth here when I get into Chapter 4, and then things are going to start to take a turn as I get to the hardest fight in the entire run after this. So remember what I said about multi-enemy fights? So we have 3 versions of the Chapter 3 Akos here, who has a lot of HP, who hits very, very hard, and is really, really annoying with stuff like Checkmate and Blade Shackle. So this ended up being a fight that I was just kind of locked for like an hour on stream on, and I was like, alright, I'm just going to have to grind some experience off stream and just kind of make sure that I can do this tomorrow. So I ended up trying as much as I could on this fight, trying a bunch of different things that I could before I ended up having to just kind of gain some levels off stream so I could get some level bonuses against him. But nothing I did ended up working, and I tried pretty much everything I could think of. These 3 Akoses here were like the most annoying fight in this entire run by far. This is kind of the thing that you could sometimes happen to you, and you gotta like either get creative to get past it or just kind of resign yourself to grinding. Luckily, there was an Inferno Guldo back in Uriah, which is about level 26 or so, that I was able to just kind of grind. That is normally the Chapter 8 big boss enemy, and thankfully, they give a huge experience multiplier, so I was able to just kind of get to level 32 without too many issues. And once I was able to finally do that, it was much, much easier getting past this fight. But I spent a lot of time on this fight, a lot of time just trying everything I could with the blades that I currently had access to. Like, Elma's really strong, but she can't really carry against all this. Like, look at this. Just the Shackle driver spam on everyone constantly. There was just really nothing I could even do about it. There was Blade Shackle as well from the Abrona tier 3s. This was a really, really hard fight to figure out how to get past. Fortunately, though, I came back with this at level 32, and it became a much, much easier fight. Once you take out the first Akos, the fight also becomes a lot easier. So a lot of the fight was just getting that chain attack meter up, chain attacking the first Akos, making sure he's going down. And then things were not nearly as difficult from there. I made sure to pre-build party meter, and it was not nearly as bad, thankfully. And once the last Akos finally went down here, I was finally able to progress the game. And this was probably easily one of the top 3 hardest fights in this run. The other 2 will be a little bit later, and we'll talk about how we kind of got past those as well. There was something else really funny in this chapter as well, once we finally got to the old factory and I was able to get past this fight. So, first of all, the Float Meadows replaces Zeke, and this fight is kind of a joke, as you can kind of imagine here, because this thing is just not tanky at all. So I end up getting past him, no issues at all. And then the Turkin enemies that normally appear in here were replaced by these massive Legere Marin enemies. And these enemies, so because of how they spawn and how big they are, there's this one enemy I just couldn't hit. So I ended up kind of soft-locked for a second here, and I had to use the death code to kind of reset the fight, which means I now had to do the fight up here since they can aggro you all the way in the vent itself. So I had to now fight them from here, and I was able to actually get past them, and then the Lila replacement was another Napon challenge mode enemy, Tippy Tappy. So that was also very easy. And a Peng is also the replacement for Goroza here, also very, very easy fight with another very squishy enemy. So a lot of these fights end up being pretty anticlimactic just because, well, a lot of these enemies are just not very strong. But that's just how it works when you're randomizing every single enemy in the game. Sometimes it'll be very easy, sometimes it'll be a lot more difficult. And that's not really the biggest deal, though, because I think it's a lot of fun just seeing really, really powerful enemies in the overworld sometimes as well and trying to fight those. Anyways, onward to Chapter 5, we get our final Zeke fight. This time he's replaced with an Ansel, so it's a third very, very easy Zeke fight here without too much difficulty at all. And then you have the Gauntlet at the end of Chapter 5. So our Wire's replacement was Brigid. Now, Brigid might seem like she would be somewhat threatening, but she's scaled kind of stat-wise to early game stats and like early game core chips, so she ends up being very, very not tanky. The Gen fight actually ended up being somewhat difficult here because it's a unique monster Guldo enemy, and he actually does have a decent amount of health. It actually felt kind of like a proper fight. He's actually a little tankier than I think Jin normally is, so this fight actually felt more like a proper boss fight here. Relic Holder Tyrannor. So that was an okay fight, at least. That was like, and it gave a decent amount of experience as well. I got 3 levels off that. That's why I wanted a chain attack there. So that was really nice. And then the core replacement is also, I think, a joke enemy that was not anything too difficult. Yes, the Broken Ferris here. So able to easily break him. He doesn't have much health. And then we're just kind of able to combo him to death here. So even though Cutie Pie is not very strong, as I mentioned earlier, she does have the 3-hit break art, she does have the launch arc, so once we finally have the good topple art, now that we have Zeke, I was able to overdrive Telos onto him, and as you can imagine, having access to good topple locking makes a lot of things a lot easier. The Chef Turkins are replaced with Lightning Sovereigns. This was a little bit of an annoying fight because of all their constant knockbacks, but otherwise they weren't too terribly bad, and Gigarozor is replaced with a pretty generic Ferris enemy, which also went down very, very quickly just because of how strong I am at this point in time. So this one ended up being not very difficult at all either. So, I saw True Rosa out in the field, and there was multiple of these in Chapter 6, and I very, very quickly realized I'm not built for this, because, wow, their health multipliers is crazy because they're normally challenge mode enemies. So I was like, alright, I'm just gonna leave. And there's even more True Roses over in the distance here, so, you know, if you ever get really, really cheeky and you want to replace, like, a normal generic enemy that there's a lot of with, like, Tyrannotite and Kuradol or something, that is an option, and you can definitely do that. I ended up fighting Lila there, as you saw, because Lila's a really good source of experience, and I was kind of getting low on experience, and I saw Lila just kind of in the overworld as a replacement for one of the soldiers, so I figured it was a good time to get some experience. Now, speaking of one of the hardest fights in this run, the rest of the way, these Aspars. You wouldn't think it, but they are actually really, really annoying. So this fight ended up taking me a lot more effort and time than I thought it was going to. So for one, they have this ability to basically restore all of their health if you cannot kill them fast enough, and level up at the same time. That is one of the things they have when they shed their skin. They just get all their health back and level up, which is really, really annoying if you can't kill them fast enough. And as you can see, they are actually pretty dang tanky. I did basically no damage to the level 1 special there with Cutie Pie. And I ended up fighting Rosa till I got to level 45 once I just kind of realized I was not going to get past that at all. And it still came down to this really climactic 1v1 here with Cutie Pie versus the last Asper here, which got all the way up to level 42 because I just couldn't kill him in time with the strategies and what I was trying to do there. But I ended up finally getting past this fight, but it ended up being a very, very annoying and very difficult fight, especially because they also had Shackle Driver. The trio fight at the end of the chapter ends up being pretty easy, just kind of 2 pretty generic enemies and 1 unique monster, Weirdo Jillik here, which is not really the tankiest unique monster to my knowledge. So that ended up mattering too much. Able to fairly easily get past this fight without too many issues. We got plenty of healing, we got combo locking, so not really a big deal. The Gen replacement enemy also goes down really, really quickly because you only needed to get it to 80% HP before the fight basically ends. And then we are on to Chapter 7. So in Chapter 7, I'm just kind of looking around for ways to get some extra EXP. I find another enemy just kind of in the overworld, which I try to fight, the evil Sandstream here. I figure I'll show him as well. How I thought I was going to have a decent EXP multiplier. It gives about 3,980, which is alright. I couldn't get like a chain attack or anything, though. I also see Jin in the overworld. I'm like, Jin has a huge EXP multiplier. But, of course, it's the version of Jin that does not give any experience because it's from Chapter 6, I think. So I just got nothing, which is really, really sad. He also just kind of stands there on the ground. He doesn't actually end up fading away because of how that fight is normally programmed. So, yeah. No experience for that fight. Really, really unfortunate. Now, the other really, really hard fight of this run. So, my Phantasms were replaced with Squood enemies. And wow, these guys suck. They do a lot of damage. They are very, very big, making them really hard to fight in this kind of enclosed small area because you'll sometimes just have to run around trying to hit them. They can very easily topple you for a really long time. This fight was a pain. This ended up taking me a pretty long time as well to figure out how to deal with it. Not to mention, if you go too far down, you can run into the poison water as well. So this is just one of the most annoying fights there is. Just straight up. You can see I just went from like full health to 0 and like very, very quickly here. And I'm like 6 levels above them. So I was thinking I might need to grind, but instead I'm like, alright, I have some extra bonus experience at the inn right now. So I'll level up all the way to 51. I'm now over 10 levels above them. And with that, with being over 10 levels above them, getting some pretty crazy level bonuses for myself, reducing their damage quite a bit, making it so they have less accuracy on me, I'm still losing some. Finally, though, I finally get a run where I'm able to kill a Squood pretty early on, get some good combos on him, get some potions, stuff like that, and we finally get to the last one, or the last two, I believe, and I'm able to actually get past this fight. This ended up being definitely one of the biggest pains in the run. This is what I'm saying, these multi-enemy fights, if you get the wrong enemy, they are a pain. They are a massive, massive pain. Like, imagine if this wasn't just a Squood. Imagine if this was Ken, Cloud Sea King Ken instead of a Squood. From the revenge mission, it would have just been over. It would have been done. I wouldn't have been able to get past it at all. So that's just something you have to worry about, something that can happen if you do a randomizer. You can just completely be soft-locked if you are very, very unlucky. Well, maybe not completely. I'm sure if you like grind it all the way to level 99 and just got some really good broken gear, you could probably figure out a way past it since they'd be locked at level 39. But man, it would be very, very difficult to get to that point still. Regardless, though, I was able to finally get past that fight. That was definitely the hardest fight the rest of the way, but there is a couple more hangups. Fortunately, the rest of Chapter 7 goes fairly easy. The Malos fight was replaced by a very easy mob Turkin, which went down very, very quick. Jen and Malice in the second half of this fight are kind of programmed to always be there as well because of how this fight works with the Numa mechanic normally. I also get Super Bridget there, as you might have seen, as my Numa replacement, who has a lot of the same driver skills as Numa does if you ever actually get to that point and want to use her. I didn't really end up worrying about it that much since I had a pretty strong team already, but that is something that they do. They kind of give, whoever the Rex replacement is gets a version of Numa for their main blade that just kind of acts if you activate Numa, you would get that blade and and kind of like a super version of that blade, which I actually think is a really, really cool mechanic in the randomizer. So, these Guldo enemies. Normally there is a giant horde of Guldos that you have to fight here, right? And this time around, in this run, they are replaced with these Sloam Runner enemies. This was something I was really worried about, because I was like, if this is the wrong enemy, I'm just completely screwed. It was already looking really, really bad here, because I only have Moraga Jin at this point in time. But fortunately, Jin is very, very useful and very, very good. If these enemies did even a little bit more damage, I was not going to get past this. But thankfully, Jin has something called Heavenly Disrupt, and that drops a lot of health potions, and can allow you to kind of keep your health up in this fight. So what we do is we use Skyward Slash to break, and then we use Heavenly Disrupt to get the topple launch smash combo on as many of these Sloam runners as possible here. And that's going to allow us to just kind of get through this fight as quickly as we can. I can only do it on one enemy at a time, but it's a slow process, but I'm able to get just enough health back, and I'm able to survive just long enough just to make sure that we're able to get this and fight these enemies and get past them all. So Jin ends up being the MVP of this fight, thankfully. And we're able to get past this fight as well. If this was like any stronger enemy or anything like that, this would have been a big pain. I think the mod makers were talking about making it so you automatically get past this fight no matter what. Just kind of how they programmed the Malos fight in Chapter 1 and the tutorial fight in Chapter 1 as well. Simply because if you get a really bad enemy here, you're just completely screwed, I think. So that's something that I think we talked about when they were like looking at my stream and just kind of watching it. Yeah, Sona Sofern, you can actually see, was in the chat at this point in time as well. So I think this is something I did mention as well. So there might be some fights that are just going to be, like, way too annoying to try to get past because of your limited options. Like I said, if this was a super boss enemy or even just a normal unique monster or something, it would probably be impossible to get past with the current team setup that is currently here. Because there's just so many of these enemies. So if you get the wrong enemy replacement here, you're probably just screwed. Regardless, though, I got lucky, and it wasn't the strongest enemy in the world, and Jim was able to just kind of carry with Heavenly Disrupt, and that is what we just kind of ended up doing here. So, looks like I put a longer version of the clip than I thought I did, but I do finally get past all of them with the last Heavenly Disrupt and the last Sloam Runner here. And then we have the Infernal Guldo. So phase 1 of this was the Gargoyle from Torna. Now, this is normally a very dangerous enemy as well. Fortunately, Jin does a lot of damage to it, and it's not going to be the strongest or the most annoying enemy in the world because we don't have to deal with it the entire time. So the second phase of Infernal Girdle is actually a different enemy because it's programmed differently in the BDAT files of the game, so they count as different enemies. That means it's replaced by a different enemy as well. So I don't have to deal with Gargoyle in the second phase, otherwise it could have been a decently cool boss fight. So it is a little sad that I can't kind of fight it with my full party here, get a decent amount of experience off of it. But thankfully, this thing gives me PTSD from Torna speedruns, and it's just one of the most annoying enemies in that game, so, you know, maybe it's for the best. Regardless, though, it is nice to at least have something that can be somewhat of a challenge here, even though we had the driver combo and just kind of still were able to get past him with no issues. Once I get my actual team back, it's replaced with Acute Melvin. This is a unique monster Turkin, but it's also not that tanky and also not that strong. So we end up still getting past it without too many issues here. At this point, there is a slight issue of me being a little bit under-leveled. I'm level 52 right now, so I'm going to have to find a way to kind of get some experience for some of the final fights if I need it. It really just depends on what those enemies are going to be. Fortunately, they weren't anything too terribly difficult, but there is the final Ion fight at the end. Ion is never replaced. That is the one enemy they don't replace since, well, you got to have your climatic final boss fight. So Ion is always Ion in this run. I see an Orion. This is the Gladiator Orion, which is really, really dangerous and really, really strong. And I really did not want to deal with that, so I run right past him. But it is just showcasing that, hey, there are super bosses in this that can just show up in the overworld. We get our final multi-enemy fight of the game here, and we get some Insectivores as a replacement for the Indoline soldiers. So they are not very difficult, thankfully, but a lot of times you can get screwed over. There's a bunch of Mithras just kind of hanging out in the overworld here as well. And, you know, if you ever want to fight Mithra, Mithra has a decent experience multiplier and is also pretty squishy, so I do end up fighting a couple of these a little bit later. It is also just really funny to see multiple Mithras just kind of just hanging out in the overworld here because of how enemy replacement works. That's obviously from Torna. So the Akos that I fight here as the gen replacement was kind of glitched. I don't know exactly what happened, but he kind of started off with like no HP. I think it's because he was a phase 2 of a different version of the fight, and it might have just been triggering from when I fought Akos before or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but anyway, it just ended up being kind of nothing fight because of that. And then the Amalthus after also ended up being a nothing fight. So the ghost fights in chapter 10, where you normally fight your party members here, these ended up being kind of annoying as well, depending on the enemy. But I fortunately just ended up using a cross set on Morag, and that gives me plenty of access to healing here, which allowed me to kind of get past them without too much issue. Otherwise, that Sovereign enemy was really, really annoying, but I was able to just kind of heal my way through it. The Morag replacement wasn't too much of an issue, but then we have the Mora Mora enemy and the, what is that, a runner? Yeah, a runner. I had to do a couple attempts on this one, because this one was kind of annoying as well. Since it has 2 enemies at once, and the Mora Mora is especially pretty annoying with how much damage it can do, and the evasion that it can just randomly activate. Fortunately, once Crossset ramps up, she does a lot of damage, so it wasn't too much of an issue to just kind of get past this anyway. So I was very thankfully just kind of able to pretty easily push past this thanks to Crossset here. And then finally, of course, there is just Ion. Ion is Ion. I get up to level 61. That makes sure I'm not getting the super severe level penalties for being 10 levels underneath him. And from here, it is basically just not really that much of a challenge at this point. We just stack up a couple orbs, and then we get ready to chain attack. I fought Ion a million times. I know exactly what Ion does. I know how to block against his most dangerous attacks, and I know how to kill him without too much issue. So Tora, Nia, and Zeke here, we end up just kind of chain attacking him here without too much of an issue. And the fight will end, and the run will end after that. So, like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be, I think, a way to make sure that boss enemies always replace boss enemies and unique monsters always get replaced with unique monsters and stuff like that, to make sure that you're not getting a bunch of, like, nothing fights like I ended up getting in this run. But there were definitely a lot of really challenging fights as well, so I did end up getting my kind of money's worth for the experience here. But there will be ways to just kind of increase the flexibility of this later, and there's a lot of other things you can randomize. I think this game mode is infinitely replayable, as I mentioned. I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it, and there's a lot of really fun and silly things you can do with it as well. So once again, if you do have interest in this randomizer, be sure to check out the video description for the link. I think it's a lot of fun. I think a lot of the improvements they are making are going to make it even better. And I'm looking forward to doing something like this again in the future with even more like silly features, or just kind of maybe doing something with Torna with it or something like that. So I think there's a lot of potential with this mod. I think there's a lot of really cool things with it. And I am very, very much looking forward to just kind of seeing the future of it and seeing more fun and silly playthroughs with it, because I think there is a lot of really cool things here. Sorry this video wasn't the greatest edited. It's something I've been meaning to get out for a while, and I just wanted to make sure that I kind of got this out before the Nintendo Direct tomorrow. And I'm not competing with Nintendo for viewership and any kind of new Xenoblade announcement that it's going to take up all my time instead if something like that does end up happening. It's definitely going to happen, by the way. I'll be streaming it tomorrow, so if you want to see that, make sure to come by here to see the Xenoblade 4 announcement stream, which is definitely happening, or Xenoblade X2, or Xenosaga HD, or whatever. With all that being said, though, I think that does about cover it for this video, so thank you all so much for watching. Once again, please be sure to subscribe. I'm very close to 100,000. I really want to hit that soon. Share with your friends. Tell them to subscribe to me as well. Tell them to like the video. Comment if you enjoyed and you want to see more or anything like that. And as always, thank you all, and have a wonderful and blessed day. And hopefully, I will see you all back here soon for some very good news or something like that.